downloading this episode of Cork Talk with me, Tim Atkin. A weekly conversation with some of the most famous people in the world of wine. Andy Neather worked at Friends of the Earth in the late 1990s, and it turned him into an environmentalist. Now a freelance journalist, he's just co-authored a very timely book about wine and sustainability with Jane Masters, MW. His research took him all over the world, looking at the effects of climate change and the broader challenges facing the wine industry. There are no easy answers, he says, but Rooted for Change plots a way forward. Hello, Andy. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Tim. Good to talk.
Busy week for you. You've launched the book.
Absolutely. Yeah, it launched on Wednesday, the 1st of October. And yeah, we had a big party at Roche-QD restaurant in the evening, and it was lovely.
I was there, enjoyed it briefly before I headed out for dinner myself. Yes. But we'll get to the book in a minute, which is rooted in change. And that's what I want to focus on really in the podcast. Yeah. But a little bit about you, just to start with. Are you a Londoner, brought up
No, I'm not.
Here,
I'm from Devon. I'm a West Countryman originally. I've lived in London 30 years now. But no, I grew up in various places, but most of it in near Exeter, in Devon.
Was wine part of your life as a kid?
It was sort of, yeah, because my dad was a wine lover. I mean, I sort of realised later how little he actually had known about wine. But he's a teacher. I mean, he was a university professor, but lifelong teacher in one mode or another. So in the classic teacher mode of sort of keeping a chapter ahead of the kids in the textbook, he could sound quite knowledgeable about wine, even though, in the mid-70s, even he would admit, I think, he was drinking Hirondelle back in the day. But yes, I guess I was around wine to a degree at a point when it was still not that common in Britain.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you've had this really interesting career. You've done lots of different things. And I think you've in a way, you quite enjoyed switching between careers, haven't you? Because you were an academic historian. You did a PhD in the States. You've been a journalist for a long time. You were a political speechwriter. You did corporate communications. I just wonder which of those gave you the most pleasure, or all of them equally so?
I think professionally, being a journalist has been what I enjoy most, and it's what I'm best at, is writing and editing. Even though, I mean, I had 11 years plus at the Evening Standard in London. I mean, the main drawback being it's sort of, I suppose, generously centre-right politics. I mean, are not mine at all. And there were other things about it that regularly drove me crazy. But, it allowed me to do a certain amount of writing. And then, to be perfectly honest, I retired early from my final day job, which was at Transport for London in corporate comms, last November. And since then, I've been doing this, and I'm having a ball. As you said. So, it's that's what I've enjoyed most. And I think the sort of corporate environment's what I like least, because it's sort of, it squeezes out all creativity in writing or anything else. Your existence is determined by a series of sort of chains of approval, and especially post COVID. I mean, it struck me very forcefully that the substance of my job was largely either sending emails or sitting in Teams meetings, and I think, there were plenty of problems with office life before that, but I think the move to remote working, well, there are upsides to it, which I totally get, but it's the actual substance of your work, I think, is dreadful. It was dreadful for me anyway.
Yeah, I mean, one of your jobs, you worked for the Labour Party for a while, and you wrote speeches for Tony Blair, didn't you?
That's right. So I worked for the Labour Party in 96, 97, and I was the sort of writer attached to the policy unit. Up to the 97 election, and I worked on the sort of battlefield campaign handbook. I was the editor of that and other stuff. And then I went off to work for Friends of the Earth for a couple of years. And then I came back into political work as a civil service speechwriter. So I worked for Jack Straw, briefly David Blunkett, and then I went to Number 10 for a year to work for Blair. That would have been in 2000, so long ago, 2000 to 2001.
Yeah. Sounds fascinating. And that little spell at Friends of the Earth, I think you were there 97 to 2000, something like that.
Yeah.
Did you ever imagine then you might end up writing a book about sustainability in the wine industry? Was the sort of seed of an idea sown, do you think?
It kind of was, yeah, because, I think I'd have been surprised if I'd end up, to know what I'd end up doing. But I did actually publish for Friends, because I was the publications manager. I mean, my main job was editing the membership magazine, but I mean, I did manage the publications as well. And I published, it's really the sort of first guide to organic wine. It's by Monty Walden.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Expert. And this would have been some circa 1998.
Yeah.
Very early on. And then I also I organised a couple of sort of reader offers on organic wines, and for which we sort of had tastings, which everyone was very excited about in the building.
Free wine.
Yes.
Right. Exactly. Tell us about Rooted in Change, the stories behind sustainable wine. I'm just interested in how it came about. What was its genesis?
It was kind of haphazard, to be honest. I mean, it started I was at a party to launch Greek Wine Month in May of last year, 2024. And some woman, a wine influencer, introduced herself to me. And then moments later, sort of was gushing to this lady behind her, "Oh, Hermione, meet my friend Andy." And Hermione turned out to be Hermione Ireland, who's MD of the Academy du Vin Library. And she said to me, we've been chatting for a couple of minutes, "Well, I'm looking for a journalist to write me a book about wine and climate change." And I said, "That's me." I mean, I'd been thinking about doing this, and I'd sort of started roughing out a proposal. I mean, trying to just think about how I would do it, how I would cover the ground. But it seemed to me that, this was one of the biggest challenges facing wine, and that the only way really to understand it was to actually go and report from the ground on it. So, I mean, we had a chat, and then we had a chat sort of subsequently, and then a couple of weeks later, she bumped into Jane Masters at some other event. None of us knew each other before this. And Jane said, "Oh, I've actually started writing a book about sustainability in wine, but I had to shelve it because she was freelance, and she'd moved to a day job at Majestic, where she was a buyer a couple of years previously." And so Hermione said to us both, "Well, how would you feel about a co-writer?" And it made sense to me because I was at that point early on in trying to extricate myself from this terrible, boring comms job. And so I wasn't absolutely sure when I'd get free and what my time would be. Anyway, Jane and I got on fine. I looked at some of what Jane had written already and, was fairly honest with her that it needed a comprehensive rewrite and sort of reordering. There was also, she'd done more bits on some things than others. And so there was quite a lot she'd written on viticulture, which obviously she knows a huge amount about. But anyway, we planned early autumn. We planned out how we were going to do it. We planned out structure. We started planning out some research, which was primarily always going to be me because she's in a very busy day job. So was I at that point. But I got out soon after. I finally got free in November of last year. I had a sort of furiously busy December. Editing, writing, planning, and doing all travel logistics. And then on New Year's Eve last year, I flew to Mexico City. I had a friend staying, and I stayed with him for 10 days. And then I went on to start the wine research, which was in California. And I had a week there in Paso Robles, Napa, and Sonoma. So at that point, I was out doing various. And then where I went, what I researched in which countries, I mean, it was slightly haphazard. One of the main goals in California was to look at regenerative agriculture because it's sort of a hot spot. So I think there's now the best part of 20 wineries, which are...
And that's driven by Tapas Creek, really, was it at the start?
Tapas Creek were the first to get ROC certification. But there's a whole load of others now. I mean, there's some of them were larger and smaller. I mean, it was interesting. So, I mean, for instance, Gundlach Bunchu in Sonoma, sort of slightly larger. Jackson family estates aren't certified, but have done large scale field trials, so sort of 50 acres at a time. There was also,
and they've got the money to do it, right?
Exactly. But they're really taking it very seriously.
Yeah.
I went to smaller places like Booker, which is a sort of boutique sized place in Paso Robles, and also O'Neill, who are big. I mean, they're in the top 10 US producers, and they'd started doing large scale field trials in Paso Robles, and it was basically I was there the day they presented the results to their reps, and it was basically that they had done this large scale field trial because they wanted to show that it could be done without disproportionate effect on yield or costs before they asked their growers to do it. And obviously, most of their grapes come from growers. Yeah. I mean, they've something huge. I mean, 8,000 hectares or something they've got. So yeah, that was that bit.
Let's come back to this. I want to come back to the stories and the countries in a minute, but let's just start with a little bit about sustainability, as the book's about sustainability, because it means different things to different people. And I think Nigel Greening in your book of Felton Rose says it means different things in one country to country even. Yeah. What was your kind of working definition, and did that change as you wrote the book?
Well, I mean, I think the clearest working definition is the famous UN one from '87, which is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the needs of future generations to meet their own needs. That's very broad brush, obviously. I mean, for Jane and for me, climate change was the biggest single component of sustainability, and that was what had driven both of us to want to write this book. Basically, I think very similarly for both of us, looking at these, especially for me, I mean, it was these unbelievable extreme weather events in all sorts of countries, hitting wine regions, other regions too, obviously, and wanting to understand that and put that in a context and come up with some sort of recommendations for action. But obviously sustainability is wider than that. I mean, we talk quite a lot about pesticides as well, which is another important part. And then the whole social sustainability angle. I mean, you can pull it out sort of as wide as you want, really, but it's usually people talk about labour standards, and that's I guess if you like, that's the sort of grabbiest thing. But it's also things like diversity and inclusion. It's things like the responsibility of wine businesses to their local communities and to rural economies. So there's a whole bunch of issues to unpack there. And then there's all sorts of issues in terms of packaging around materials. So, I mean, the main yardstick, which we're using right the way through, is your carbon emissions. But I mean, there's other things too. I mean, recycling. So, for instance, bag in box has major carbon savings because you're not transporting glass around the world and so on. On the other hand, the inners and the taps in a box are not recyclable. You just throw them away. And so this is one of the things we explore at length in the book, is nothing is ever really completely sustainable. And it's, I think in a way, it may be a sort of a difficult concept for people to grasp, or maybe it's frustrating, because very often we're led to believe, in terms of consumer products and so on, if you buy such and such a product, that's green, that will be good. And you can't just make those sort of simple decisions. I mean, it's yes, it's better to buy some things than others, but it's just complicated.
There are always sort of trade-offs, aren't there, and things like that.
There are always trade-offs.
Yeah. The thing you brought to the book, I think, was to make it about stories and people, and it's the journalistic side of you that you do very well, rather than about science and stats. Or there is science in the book, and there are stats as well, and plenty of detail for people who want to drill down into that. But you said, you started off in California. How did you decide after that which countries to go to and which people to go and see? And I'm delighted that many of the people who did go and see are people who I admire massively, and 2 or 3 cases are good friends of mine. So, I mean, I think you chose well. But how did you choose the countries and the people?
Well, in terms of actually choosing, I mean, I should say, so, for instance, I didn't go to either Spain or France, partly because I'd already travelled a lot there and knew various people. So, for instance, I think you're friends with the Callejos.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah,
yeah. And I mean, I'd visited there and talked to. I'd visited there the two summers ago, and then I subsequently, talked on the phone at length with Noelia. And then similarly in the various places in France. I wanted to cover different places, different reasons. So, for instance, Chile and Argentina. I mean, one of the key things there for me was irrigation-based viticulture systems, and then some of this inevitably it ends up being dictated by quite mundane issues of sort of timekeeping. And I mean, the whole book was written at sort of breakneck speed. Frankly, I mean, it's been a year for the whole thing, basically. I had a week in Chile, I had a week in Argentina, and I couldn't really spare more than that. So as a result, I couldn't get up as far north as Limari, for instance, and I couldn't get down to Itata or Biobío. Unfortunately, I mean, I would love to have gone. And then when I was there, I went to a bunch of important producers. I wanted to talk to Eduardo Jordan from Torres. I was keen to see the Colchagua Valley and there Montes. I was keen to meet Derek Mossman Knapp because of he's actually doing one of the few places in Chile doing dry farming.
Yeah, and with old vines. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also I saw Álvaro Espinosa at Tirial, and obviously he's just this biodynamic pioneer. I guess you could say, I mean, in a way, a criticism of this approach would be that it's inevitably selective, but it ultimately was about looking at good practice rather than looking across the board. And I guess as a journalist, I mean, the immediate problem I have with that is that, for instance, say in France, you've got very nearly a quarter of production is organic now, but 75% isn't, and there are particular areas like, for instance, Champagne, which have got a really pretty poor record on their pesticide use. And now there have been recent...
about labour as well. It's not been too good either, has it?
Or similarly, for instance, in South Africa, I think it's about 2/3 of producers now are covered by the WITA standard. WITA is the sort of labour standards organisation, and they go around and inspect housing and they look at wages and so on as well, and that's great. They've done a lot, but then there's still a third or whatever it is of producers who aren't signed up to that.
Well, you can't cover them all, can you? You as you said.
No. And I mean, the thing was, I guess we wanted to be positive in a sense. We wanted to look at best practice. We want to look at how you can do this, And so, so if that means going to talk to really inspiring people like Álvaro Espinosa
or Johan Reinecker or Noelia Callejo or whatever,
just doing these fantastic things. I mean, they've got probably got neighbours who are really not doing very good things.
But you can't focus on them, can you? Really?
No.
And I mean, where else did you went to South Africa? Did you go to Greece as part of this tour?
I went to Greece. Greece was the final stop. In Greece, I mean, in a way, it's partly because I just love Greece and I'm fascinated by Greek wines. I mean, I travelled there before, so I was in various areas I hadn't been in before. I mean, in the northern Peloponnese, for instance, interesting stuff going on there. Theodora Rovalis, for instance, and Tetramythos over that as well. This sort of high altitude Greek kind of almost cool climate agriculture.
And you sort of sprinkled these things throughout the book, didn't you? Really?
Yes. And then up in the north in Nausa as well.
Let's come back to climate change, because you described this at the beginning of the book, and you said it's the reason why you wanted to write it, really, as an existential threat to wine and the people who make their living from it. How bad is it? And is it getting worse? Were you shocked by what you heard in your travels? And were you hearing similar things in different countries about the way that climate change or chaos is affecting the world of wine?
I think we're definitely hearing. I mean, I think the key things really are, well, in terms of the vine, heat stress, water stress, and then extreme weather events, whether that's very heavy rain or hail in particular.
Or wildfires, I suppose. Yeah.
Wildfires, absolutely. I mean, California and Oregon this summer, Australia recently. No, I mean, it's an enormous problem. And, that's actually something which, I mean, European growers haven't really had to deal with much. I mean, I'm going out to Galicia in a few weeks' time, and I'm going to visit Monterrey. Well, I'm there, and in Valdeorras, there was
terrible summer fires.
Yeah. I don't know yet, I mean, before I've actually talked to those guys, what the extent of damage from smoke taint is, because that's, I mean, there's a legal case in Napa going on right now where, wineries are suing, because this is obviously, at least in North America, smoke taint is it's actually a bigger threat to the crop than your vines burning. You can get smoke taint, sort of tens of kilometers down the road, and so it's a sort of whole new ball game in terms of the threats. But I think heat stress and water stress are the biggest ones. Chile is the most extreme example of this, because the dramatic falls in average rainfall, really just in the last 20 years. And it means that, you put it together with issues of global demand. I mean, there's thousands of hectares of vines being torn up in Chile.
Well, and it's funny, because I did my report this year and tried to get the latest figures out of them, and they just wouldn't tell me, and they just said, well, they haven't been updated. Well, I mean, whether it's not they don't know, or whether so much has been pulled out that they think it's a bad news story. I don't know, really.
I mean, I think it's. I guess it is a bad news story, and it's obviously Chile. Its economy is quite heavily based on these sort of agricultural exports. It's a very bad news story. And there's other places where, I think, there's certainly in parts of Catalonia, parts of Greece, you're going to find it, very hard. There's usually other stuff going on. So, like, for instance, Santorini this year has had catastrophic harvest, one of the smallest ever. That's partly down to climate. It's also other things going on in that rural economy, i.e., development and tourism, and people just selling the land. So I mean, it's never quite as simple as just the land drying up or whatever. And then the other problem with climate, which is more subtle, is how it changes wines. And I've written for you about this recently, but I mean, the key thing is that the whole of the European appellation system, which runs most places in Europe, everything basically modelled on the system that the French developed from the 1930s. It's all about typicity. It's all about what you think wine should taste like from an area. And when we're seeing really quite radical shifts, it's not to say that the new wines are necessarily bad. It's just when you've got Côte d'Or reds at 15%. I mean,
it's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy, and there's
and then in the 70s, people have been chaptalizing to get them to 12%.
Absolutely.
It's funny, this thing about winners and losers. I mean, you talk about it a little bit in the book, and in a sense, it's nonsense to talk about winners and losers, because we're all losers, really. But there are certain places, and funnily enough, I just got sent a bottle today of Solaris, which is grown in Norway, which I think must be probably the most northerly vineyard in Europe, I would have thought, and it's bloody good, And I thought, okay, I mean, she's a winner in a sense, but it's certainly completely changing the map of wine. And I think over the next 20 years, if we're around to see it, it's just going to be stood on its head, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, the Scandinavian industry is fascinating. and it appears to be workable, at least at the level of say Denmark. You'll have Copenhagen restaurants sourcing these Solarises and so on. But I mean, the obvious one from where we sit is English wines, and I mean there I wouldn't. Well, I would. Number one, I wouldn't downplay. I think the biggest factor in English wine improving has just been the ambition of growers.
Better winemaking as well, don't you think?
Yeah. Better winemaking, and it's just there's the sort of English winemaking world in the 70s. I mean, it was. I don't want to say they were cranks, but it was quite eccentric. Some of it, and it has been completely transformed. Obviously, the climate helps that as well. I mean, it's on average, it's about 1%. It's about 1 degree up since the 70s. Although that sort of masks the really important bit is the growing season extending, and at the back end of the growing season, if you can guarantee if most years you get an extra 2 weeks of warm sunshine in September, which you do now much more, that's a huge difference because
you can ripen the grapes.
To ripen the grapes.
Yeah.
I mean, the other, the flip side of that is that with the growing season being extended out earlier, it means your grapes are going to be more prone to frost damage.
Because they're budding earlier, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, the threats facing the wine business are numerous, generational succession, overall profitability, declining sales of alcohol in general, blah, 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 blah. I just wondered, given the lack of profitability in the industry, do these efforts that are people making to be sustainable in the vineyard and the winery, do they involve a degree of financial sacrifice? And somebody in South Africa said to me, can't be green if you're in the red. Did you was that something you talked to people about when you were doing the book?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of people in South Africa said similar things. I mean, I remember Bruce Jack said to me, that's a very Northern European position. You just to worry about. We're just trying to stay afloat. And I mean, I remember the owner at Delheim Wines saying sort of similarly. Well, the most important thing for me is that this is 60 people's livelihoods here.
Yeah.
And I think, probably that economy and, that society does make that a bit more stark. But no, I mean, financial sustainability is clearly essential.
It's number one, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah. I mean, if you haven't actually got a functioning business, then you're not going to be making wine green or otherwise. So, I think that, it depends. I mean, it's not necessarily more expensive to make sustainable wine. I mean, I remember Johan Renneke saying to me, he was explaining how he was doing his sort of rewilding bits of his vineyards, and he said, people say it's expensive, but then so are chemicals, or for instance,
they're probably more expensive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I remember the vineyard manager at Booker in California explaining to me how they were using drones to drop lacewings and predators of the vines, and she said it's a lot cheaper than spraying. It takes one person with a drone, a couple of hours rather than a couple of days of spraying or whatever.
Yeah.
I think one of the other issues is that in terms of packaging, for instance, some of the packaging solutions are more expensive, even though they're less materials intensive, and it's about economies of scale. So I think it was what's his name at Tetramethos? I can't remember the name of the owner now, but and he was saying, we use these using capsules without plastic in them, for instance, and they're more expensive, and they shouldn't be. I think in time those things, or for instance, lightweight bottles and things, will get cheaper as the demand for them goes up.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. You said that 40% of wine's carbon footprint is glass bottles.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, is bulk shipping the answer? There's one, you talked to RJ Butter, I think, at Kleiner Salzer, where he said the problem with shipping the wine shipping to England, so it's bottled there, is you're then taking bred out of the mouths of people who live in South Africa and could have bottled the wine. So it's that thing you were talking about earlier, that there's no one simple answer. It's always a bit of a trade-off.
There's no simple solutions. I mean, I think, and it should be said as well, the main driver by far for moving to bulk shipping has been saving money.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
not sustainability.
Not sustainability. And it's about 40% plus of the UK wine market now.
Yeah.
What's on the shelves is bottled here. I mean, those were some of the most extraordinary visits I made. Actually, I was at both Enserk in Cheshire and with Jane up in Greencroft near Durham, and these gigantic plants. And you literally at Enserk, there's about 30 tankers a day come in. They hook them
wine.
Up.
Wow.
Yeah. And each of them, it's in a. So you've got a flexi tank, which is basically a 24,000 litre plastic bag. So in fact, in the back of a shipping container, it fits into the shipping container. You fill it in the shipping container at the winery. You ship it over, and then Enserk or whoever will pump it into their stainless steel tanks. You do all sorts of tests on it. And ultimately bottle it, and then you can see these very big name
brands
wines coming off the production line.
Yeah, I admire you for going to places like that. I mean, I kind of went to some of them when I was doing my MW. I've not been since. I've not been to bulk filling because it wasn't as big a business then. But things like, going to bottling lines and the factories, furnaces making these things. I mean, it's something that journos hate. I mean, I don't know if you know that famous Cyril Ray limerick, do you? Where he said, "I would if I could, but I can't stand one more bottling plant. I'd rather be here drinking ice-cold beer, writing this with la plume de ma tante," which I thought was one of the great limericks about bottling lines. But what did you learn from all these things, looking at the underbelly of wine, really, the shipping and the bottling and the glass manufacturing and all those things? Did it make you understand the business better?
It did. I mean, I think the sort of simple fact is just how incredibly complicated global supply chains are now, and how everything is shipped large distances, and that incidentally isn't necessarily just shipping the wine. So quite a lot of the bottles used in the US are actually made in China. So they're being shipped across the Pacific to China, filled in the US, and in some cases being shipped back to China or shipped wherever. Or the capsule, for instance. I mean, there's it's not as extreme as however many thousands of parts go into an iPhone and are shipped around the world, but it's very complicated. And I guess in terms of sustainability, it comes back to this point that there's no simple answers to this. I mean, so what we tried to do with the book was it's really giving people an understanding of the sort of the parameters of these problems, these challenges. Not putting forward simple solutions, because there aren't any on the whole. But certainly for me, I understood those businesses and those processes a lot better, having actually been around these
talk to people. Talk to people, I mean, I wonder that how much of the responsibility lies with us, the consumers of wine. It's very interesting. I think in the book, it's very it's not prescriptive at all. I think you actually make suggestions as to how people can improve their vineyards, they can improve their wineries, and how we as consumers can behave, I don't know, more ethically. Is that the right word? I mean, what are those sort of imperfect choices, as you call them, exactly? What are them? Well,
I mean, I think for a start, you can look at the weight of the bottles, or if indeed you need to buy wine in bottles at all. I mean, this is one of the points where is it a consumer choice, or is it more down to the importer or even the producer? It's probably the importer. So, for instance, the Wine Society have switched to using these rPET, so recycled drinks bottle plastic bottles made by a company called Pacamama. They make about $1.5 million a year now. It's still quite a small company. And the Wine Society are using theirs for several of their big selling lines, like their own Burgundy and things. that's a decision which a big importer like them has taken. For the consumer, I don't know. If you can find a wine you like in a box, that's probably.
But also supporting people who farm sustainably and have good good labour practices and all those things is part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think in general, buying organic or biodynamic, is greener. We're very careful to say in the book, just because it's organic or biodynamic, it doesn't mean it's sustainable, but it's more sustainable. The agriculture is certainly more sustainable. Yeah. And in terms of things like packaging, the notorious one is very heavy bottles. I came across bottles up to 1.2 kilos.
And that's a dumbbell, isn't it? Basically, you try lifting 2 kilos.
Yeah. Well, a manager who was showing me around the Ardagh Group's bottle factory in Barnsley that I went to, I said, and I was watching 300 and 400 gram bottles coming off literally out of the furnace along the production line, still red hot, cooling out. And I said, I've seen a 1.2 kilo bottle in Chile a couple of weeks ago. He said, well, we could get 3 out of that, and I think it's probably less of an issue in this country, but there's certainly some places, Far East, South America, where there's still prejudice in favour of people think a heavy bottle means it's a quality wine.
And I think Italy and China, particularly wines being sold in China, maybe Brazil to a degree, but there are certain markets, as you said, where people associate bottle weight with quality. So in the same way that people used to associate oak with quality in red wines and think it's got to have masses of oak to be a good red wine. And it's complete nonsense, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
How much did it change you as a consumer writing the book? And did it make you consider your own habits, as it were?
Yeah, I'm much more conscious of bottle weight now. It wouldn't have been something which I would have really noticed before, I don't think. Even though I sort of intellectually knew that it was an issue, but no, it's a major difference. I think I'd just say the other choice consumers can make is for cork versus screw cap. And
I was going to ask you about that. Is natural cork making a comeback?
In terms of the numbers, I'm not sure. I think cork has certainly sort of pushed back the tide of the synthetic sort of plastic corks, which I loathe, and
I do too. Not at least because you can't get them back in the bottle. Not that I need to very often, but
no, it's just a horrible thing, and you can't recycle them. So I think cork is winning against them. I think the tricky thing for the cork producers is that where a market has decided to go mostly or heavily for screw caps, New Zealand and Australia, the obvious examples.
And surprisingly, Austria, somebody told me. Someone at Amarim said Austria was a big market for screw cap. Yeah.
Once you've lost those markets, I think it's quite hard to win them back. But no, screw caps are, they are, in theory, they're recyclable, but they're usually not actually because they're too little. They get, they get lost. And you have to burn off the inner as well. And no, cork is a wonderfully recyclable material. You can recycle it. You downcycle it, and you use it in sort of footwear and tiling and things. But it's obviously it's sustainable to the extent that it literally grows on trees.
And good for carbon capture as well. And also, to harvest it, you don't have to cut the tree down. You just remove the bark, don't you?
Yeah. No, and you do. It locks up carbon. So corks actually have if you take into account the carbon they store, they have negative carbon footprint.
Yeah, which is amazing. The end of the book, it's almost the last line of the book. You end by telling people to enjoy wine, which I think is an important message. Did researching and writing this book kind of deepen your love of wine in a sense, or did it make you think, oh my God, what's its future viability?
No, I think it did. Yeah, I think it just understanding, how it works and how those supply lines work, and also just talking to so many people in so many different countries close together and hearing the sort of same sorts of stories from them. The same challenges. No, I think it definitely improved my my enjoyment of wine. Yeah,
well, that's the most important thing of all, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Last question for you is: how do you get away from wine? You're not contemplating another career change, I hope not. We need you writing about wine.
I'm not. No, although I do want to do another book now, and I don't think it's going to be just about wine. I'm kicking around ideas about sort of wine and food, probably in somewhere I love, like Spain or Greece. Yeah. Because I think, obviously, I work mostly in wine. So do you, and that's wonderful. But it can be limiting as well. It's it's quite a little world in a way.
Yeah, I hope that both of us have interests outside wine, and I know you're a reader as well, and enjoy travel and speaking foreign languages, and I think all of those things are foreign cultures. The cultures are part of the wine, really, and vice versa. I think
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, look, good luck with the book. It's Rooted in Change, The Stories Behind Sustainable Wine by Angie Neather and Jane Masters MW, published by Académie du Vin Library. And it's out this week from all good booksellers and that other place online where people go to sometimes buy books. Andy, best of luck.
You can buy it direct from the Académie du Vin.
Even better, buy it direct. That'd be very sustainable. Buy it direct from the publisher. What a great idea. Best of luck with the book. I think it's fantastic. I mean, there's so much work gone into it. I'm amazed you wrote that in a year. I mean, okay, Jane had done 40% of the work, but I think a lot of it you rejigged and refashioned in a way. So, Andy, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and best of luck, and see you soon down the road, somewhere, London, Herne Hill. Oh, it is in London, whether it's Spain or whatever. It's been great chatting to you. See you soon, my friend.
Thanks, Ben. Bye-bye.
Great to chat to someone who's writing about one of the most important and terrifying issues of our time and how it relates to wine. I can't recommend Andy and Jane's book highly enough. Next week on Cork Talk, my guest is Amanda Thompson, CEO of Thompson & Scott and the woman behind the non-alcoholic wine brand Naughty. Join me then. Thanks for listening to Cork Talk. If you want to read more reports, articles and tasting notes by me, go to my website, timatkin.com. You can also follow me on Twitter @TimAtkin and on Instagram @TimAtkinMW. See you next week.